Hello, I'm Amanda Walker and welcome to Inside America, the show that brings you insight and analysis of the biggest issues facing the United States right now. In today's episode, the US economy, the driving force in Donald Trump's re-election. Now he has to deliver on his promise of a golden age. Despite signs of strength, cost of living and general disapproval of the economy was the major election issue for millions of frustrated voters. It allowed Donald Trump to seize on a sense of nostalgia for his first presidency.
Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? I'm here today with a message of hope for all Americans. With your vote in this election, I will end inflation.
Trump is inheriting a healthy economy. Inflation has already fallen below 3%. All eyes are now on the potential impact of the president-elect's sweeping economic promises of tax cuts, tariffs, and mass deportation.
We don't know what the timing and substance of any policy changes will be. We therefore don't know what the effects on the economy would be.
Coming up, we talk to people feeling the pinch in their pockets.
Very expensive, very expensive.
And we unpack how another 4 years of Donald Trump could impact the US economy.
The last thing he needs is to frighten the bond market into keeping long rates high. They're already pretty high. They go up. All of his dreams of having a golden age go away with it.
Well, we know a cross-section of people from all demographics say they voted in the 2024 election because of how they felt about the economy. Many young Black and Latino men say they turned to Trump because of inflation, wages, bad job prospects, and the general cost of living. People believed quite simply that they were better off under Donald Trump than they were under Joe Biden. I went to speak to shoppers getting their groceries to find out how they feel about their own and their country's finances and whether Donald Trump round 2 will equal prosperity. Does it feel more expensive than a year ago?
Very expensive, very expensive.
For all of these, I paid like, what, 50? It's just, sorry, a bunch of ice cream.
You're pregnant, you need ice cream.
Yes, but we have fruits and vegetables. So yeah, I mean, it used to be, we would get, broccoli for like $1.99 a pound. Now it's like $2.49, $3.49, something like that.
Loading up your car, do things feel more expensive than they used to?
Yes, now it's very expensive. Now I'm doing delivery, so it's not easy. Because I drive a lot, so when the fuel go up, it's very difficult for us.
Donald Trump's going to make it better?
Yeah, I think he's going to be better. I think.
Why do you think that?
Because he have to do it. He did it before, and he's going to do it again.
So cost of living was better. You had more money when Trump was president? Did you?
Yes, it was better. It was really better.
Was the economy on your mind when you voted?
Yes, I voted for Trump, actually.
Because of the economy?
Yes, absolutely.
Did it feel better under Trump when he was president? Did you have more money?
Yes, it did.
Felt that way?
Yes. I felt a little bit more secure.
You've done your shopping. Does it feel like things in this cart are more expensive these days?
No, actually, it doesn't. It feels so far the same.
Really?
Yeah.
From when?
As it has been over the course of the pandemic.
Really?
Elevated from supply chain and from inflation as a result of the pandemic, but no worse yet.
Okay.
I expect it's going to change significantly when President Trump gets into office.
In what way?
Well, I expect prices to go significantly up.
He's promising they'll go down.
Yeah, but he's a liar and he's wrong. So what else can you say?
What makes you think they'll go up specific to his policies?
If he implements the tariffs that he has boasted about implementing, that will undoubtedly cause the companies that have to pay those tariffs to increase their prices and put the burden of those tariffs onto consumers.
So Trump enters office at a time when the economy is already on the up. Can the Trump-Vance administration capitalize on this moment? Douglas Holtz-Eakin is a former director of the Congressional Budget Office. Now he's president of the American Action Forum. And I started by asking him if that very negative view of the economy under Joe Biden is accurate.
Beginning in 2021, America basically got back to full employment pretty quickly. Early in 21, it was well below, unemployment rate was well below 5%.
Post-COVID.
Post-COVID. And so 2021 inflation goes from 1.5% to 7%, ultimately peaks at 9.1. So real wages fall in 2021. Everyone's going to work. They come into 2022, they're behind. 2022, same story. Inflation, taxes, and wages. They've now worked for 2 full years, and they're further behind than when they started. And they were very angry. 2023, we finally see it turn the corner. You get some real wage growth, but cumulatively, most people are still behind. And that's what drove the election. It was the hangover from those 2 years of working and getting further behind. And they just never overcame that.
Was it Biden's fault?
In part. We had 2 major policy errors in the United States. One was the Federal Reserve staying way too loose for way too long. And the second was the American Rescue Plan, $2 trillion of stimulus in an economy very close to full employment that already had $3 trillion in stimulus in it. It was too much. It was destined to cause problems, and it did.
When I was speaking to voters during the campaign, I heard from so many people, I was so much better off under Trump. They were great times. Nostalgia or reality?
Little of both. There was a reality there that the economy had been extremely sluggish post-Great Recession. And when Trump took office, it went from dead in the water to growing at about 3% after 2 years. It was really a big liftoff, and it was some spending, tax reform, big regulatory reform. And then he picked a trade war with China, and it slowed down considerably. And I think COVID, in a weird way, rescued him from the consequences of some of his worst policy errors, so people never saw them.
And he's promised a golden age now.
Yes.
One of those things he said, lower income taxes. What do you see as the likely outcome of that? Could boost growth, but downsides?
It's important to remember that the tax cuts are in place. They will go away at the end of next year. So most of what they're going to do is simply keep in place what we have. That's not going to dramatically change either deficits or growth. It's just going to be more of the same. They might be able to do some smart tax reform, get some additional growth incentives. I can have a list of that. But he's offered a whole bunch of things on the campaign trail that are absolutely not good for growth, that would blow a big hole in the deficit. And the last thing he needs is to frighten the bond market into keeping long rates high. They're already pretty high. If they go up, all of his dreams of having a golden age go away with it. So they have to tread lightly on how much more deficit they create. I'd say none.
Tariffs, another big thing on the campaign trail, higher tariffs on imports. What's going to be the fallout of that?
That would be unprecedented for the United States, for anyone else for that matter. It would be enormous. It's as large as the famous Smoot-Hawley tariffs of the Great Depression. It's a $3 trillion tax increase over the next 10 years. In most circles, Republicans saying, I'd like to raise taxes by $3 trillion, but discussion ends right there. But he's very set on this. I think it's got an enormous number of problems. It is in and of itself a tax increase. It's a very regressive tax increase. It's going to hit low-income people hard. It will invite retaliation. There'll be strong retaliation. It'll damage international relationships. And it's not going to bring back the golden age of manufacturing in the United States. The reality is the United States is the second largest manufacturer on the globe. It makes more things than Mexico, Japan, and Germany combined. And so I don't know what problem he's fixing with these tariffs.
And mass deportations, what impact is that going to have when you're removing potentially millions of people who are a workforce in America?
The immigration that we saw in 2023 is quietly one of the big reasons we got inflation to come down so quickly. The Federal Reserve got 2 very big breaks. We got a big productivity boom, and we had about 4.1 million immigrants, not all of whom were just these stereotypical low-income, low-wage workers. We had skill levels across the board. So if you get that much more supply come online, it's easier to get inflation down. His proposal is to reverse that. And so you deal with the consequences of reversing that. Tighter labor markets, higher costs for things. I don't think people would be upset if the border controls were tighter and we had less illegal immigration. No one should favor that. Legal immigration, the United States means more, not less. We have sub-replacement fertility. If we don't have immigration, we don't grow as a nation, either in population, labor force, output. So immigration is very important to our future, and he's going in the wrong direction. And then the deportations. That's the most problematic. His claim is that he will deport anyone here illegally in a year. We did a serious scrub of these numbers when he first ran for president, promised the same thing. It costs $500 billion. You have to build all sorts of facilities to hold people, and then you need judges to adjudicate their cases, and you need ICE officers to find them to do all this, and then you have to send them back to the country of origin. So it's really expensive. You lose about 6% of the workforce, so it's bad for the economy. And you tear the fabric of society by raiding every house and firm to find those here illegally. He didn't do it in 2017 because it's all those things, and I don't believe he would do that again. He finally won with the popular vote. He reshaped the party in his image. That would be a horrific step in the wrong direction. I think even he will figure this out.
So when you look collectively at his promises, whether it's mass deportation, whether it's tariffs on imports, lower income taxes, are people going to be better off as he promises? Is there going to be a golden age under Donald Trump and with the economy?
Right now, the economy is in very good shape. The U.S. grew at 2.8% in the third quarter. It's on track to grow at 2.5% in the fourth quarter.
So he's inheriting a good situation.
He's inheriting a very good situation. Global oil supplies are such that he's not going to run into big gas price increases and other things that have typically hurt U.S. growth. So he's got a lot of tailwinds at his back. If the policies are put in place to support that and don't create volatility, he could have a really good run. On the other hand, he could choose out of that same set of policies to massively increase deficits, try to do mass deportations, impose an enormous tariff, and undo all of it. The choices are in his hands.
Douglas Holtz Eakin there. Of course, the US economy doesn't operate in isolation. It wasn't the only country hit hard by inflation. Globally speaking, the US is doing well. Current forecasts say it's likely to outperform expectations. But could Trump tariffs jeopardize growth? To discuss that and more, I'm joined by Stephen Hamilton, who is Assistant Professor of Economics at George Washington University, and Chris Matthews, who is Washington Correspondent for Market Watch. Stephen, let me start by quoting you. You wrote that Donald Trump offers quite the economic trifecta of the deportation of millions of people, the imposition of 10 to 20% tariffs on all imports, and the end of central bank independence. If implemented, these policies would be utterly calamitous for the US economy. Say what you feel. Why is that?
If he does do exactly what he said, then yes, I think I have no doubt it would be very damaging to the US economy. It would be inflationary at a time where, this sort of smooth landing that we've been able to achieve is pretty fragile. The last thing we need is the kind of supply shocks that come from, deporting tens of millions of people, interfering with the independence of the central bank, and of course, raising the prices of every American good as a result of the tariffs.
Okay, so another thing he's promised, Chris, drill baby drill, to boost US oil production and lower gas prices. But ExxonMobil's CEO had something to say about that, right?
Right. He said in an interview recently that he doesn't believe that the U.S. can produce a lot more oil. I mean, oil prices now are somewhat depressed. Demand globally is somewhat depressed. And, the U.S. is already producing a historic level of energy now. So, that's, maybe he's talking his book a little bit, but that's definitely something Trump has to consider as he takes office.
So much to talk about. He is forming a cabinet. We know the people who are closest to him. One of them is Elon Musk. I'm really interested in both of your takes on this because it's pretty unprecedented, right? You've got the world's richest man who is clearly, very purposefully getting in the president's ear by his side a lot of the time. What can we expect from that, Stephen?
Well, they've already created a new government department called DOGE,
Right.
DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah.
I'm not
Let's
sure
have
Trump.
less government by having more
and I'm not sure Trump knows that's a reference to an internet meme
Right.
about a dog. Right?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So Elon is quite successful in getting an internet meme named as a new U.S. government department, right? So the question with that is, which is the main measure, right, that he's involved in, really how much progress is it going to be able to make? If you look at the U.S. budget, there's not that much fat in there, right? There's big stuff like defense, there's, Social Security, there's Medicare. These are not things you can take the scythe to, right? So, he talks about, cutting the workforce of Twitter by 80%. Oh, great. If you cut the US government employment by 80%, it'd make hardly any difference to the budget, right? So, I'm a bit skeptical as to how much, this is actually going to achieve in practice.
What about you, Elon
Yeah,
Musk?
I agree. Congress is the one who has responsibility for spending, taxes, that sort of thing. And so to house this in the White House is a little bit, not the right way to go about it. You're going to have to get Congress's buy-in for any kind of serious cuts. And so there's a long history of these sort of very public committees to look at the U.S. government and cut spending. And most of the time they're not very successful. So I don't expect he will be successful. The other thing to think about is that Donald Trump has a long history of clashing with advisors, especially someone as high profile as Musk. A lot of people don't think that this town is big enough for the both of them.
Yeah,
and
could
so
it crash and burn, do you think? Two big egos in the room.
It could very well crash and burn. And I think there might be a bet on the betting site Polymarket whether Elon Musk and the Doge department will be around by the summer. And so I think a lot of people are expecting that might end in tears.
Okay. Another big promise, tax cuts. How's that going to shake down, do you think?
Yeah, so we had this Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that came in under Trump previously in 2017. And that was a dramatic bill. Trillions of dollars, right, of tax cuts that were largely unfunded for households, but also for businesses. They radically cut corporate income tax rates. And the evidence shows those tax cuts were pretty effective, right? They have driven investment pretty significantly. And I suspect they're part of why the US economy is really the only advanced country that's growing rapidly right now, right? So that's coming up for kind of renewal in the next year. The Republicans have the sweep of everything, so they're really going to get to decide exactly what they want. And so, I think the big question that they're yet to answer is, what about the deficit, right? Because it's great to announce tax cuts, but if they're unfunded, we're already in an unsustainable position. How are we going to afford this?
And I'm just interested generally, Chris, about this idea of the economy is doing pretty well. The kind of signs are pretty positive, but people aren't really feeling that. They certainly weren't feeling that in the run-up to the election. So how do you explain this gap between the reality and the perception?
Well, you have already mentioned the historic inflation that we experienced, and that's not something that we've had in the U.S. in my entire lifetime. So I would say many, if not most voters, never experienced price rises like that. And so that's a really important thing. The other thing is that the trend may be more important than the status of the economy. Yes, the unemployment rate is low. It's a lot higher than it was. And so interest rates, again, maybe they're not historically high, but they're much higher than people have experienced in this country in nearly 15 years. And so you have to take into account sort of where things are going, not just sort of the state of the economy.
But how much of it is about political perception, though? There's a really interesting YouGov poll which says that the Republicans who for the last 2 years have been saying that they are worse off, apparently in the last month, there's been a 16-point drop in the percentage of those Republicans saying that they were doing worse a year ago. What happened in the last month? Donald Trump won the election. So is there that sense of, well, I already feel a bit better because my guy's in?
Yeah, look, Donald Trump, whether you agree or disagree, there's a perception in the American public that he's a businessman, very successful, very good on the economy. And you compare that, and things were quite good, frankly, under the Trump administration economically. And you compare that to the last 4 years, which has been some of the hardest, times in recent U.S. history in terms of the economy. So you can't blame people. But I would say, if you're worried about your household expenses, and the consequence of that is that you vote for Trump, it's a little strange that he's the guy that's going to raise the price of everything by implementing across-the-board tariffs.
Let me just ask you about that, though, because speaking to voters before the election, there was a real sense of nostalgia for Trump's presidency. People would literally say, I was so much better off, I was happier, I had more money. What's the level of truth in that? How would you characterize the Trump economy in his first presidency?
Well, something that happened between, I don't know if everyone remembers, but we had a pandemic.
Right.
Right. And, Donald Trump personally signed checks to American households for thousands of dollars, right? Part of this inflation is that being taxed back, right? We pushed a lot of income into the country, and that pushed inflation up, and this is that money going back out again, right? So, whether it's fair or otherwise, I think Biden did wear a lot of the sort of pain for that post-pandemic period, which was bad in every country in the world. And every leader everywhere has felt the same pain. So, that's how it goes in politics, right?
Yeah.
It's who's in the chair at the particular time.
And everyone's very good, aren't they, at saying what the Democrats did wrong now. But how could they have got things better on the economy and on that messaging that a lot of what happened was down to this huge moment in history, the pandemic?
Right. I mean, it's really hard to make the argument to the public that, it's not my fault that things are so bad. And so I think Trump was in a great position. He could rail against the state of the economy, and, it wasn't his fault, it was Biden's fault. And so Kamala Harris was supposed to somehow both defend her administration's record and also say, I'm going to make things even better. And so that's just a difficult political position to put yourself in.
And I just want to go back to another cabinet pick that I know you've written about, Chris, RFK Jr., causing a lot of controversy. What impact could that have on the markets, particularly when you look at the pharmaceutical industry?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing that impact. I think investors are very afraid about, what this might do to pharma companies, as HHS Secretary Kennedy would be in charge of the FDA, which approves new drugs. Also, a lot of fear about sort of food manufacturing companies. RFK has made a lot of statements about sort of additives in foods and other ingredients. And so investors are, I think, rightfully a little bit scared, a little skittish about investing in those types of firms. I think, the reaction might be a little bit overdone. An HHS secretary does have a lot of power over appointing people and that sort of thing, but there are processes in place at the FDA and other agencies where companies have due process laws to sort of fight against decisions that they deem as unfair. And so I think for him to have any impact, it's going to take a very long time, and there'll be battles in the courts over anything that's very controversial.
And we are approaching the end of the year. As news outfits, it's our duty to start predicting things for next year. So I want to ask you really what you think, Stephen, that Donald Trump's main economic challenge might end up being. When you look at everything he's promised, when you look at kind of world forces that are beyond his control, what do you think is going to be his economic headache next year?
That's a great question. So I would say I can't remember a time with a greater degree of uncertainty about the next 12 to 18 months, frankly. I mean, I really can't. I don't think we've seen anything like it in decades.
Because of Trump?
Yeah. Because we have this soft landing, which is very delicate, right? The Fed is just trying to ease off the brakes a little bit. And what we need is stability. And what we have now is a big shock. We have all these things potentially changing, and I think it's frankly impossible to predict how they're going to net out. What a lot of it will depend on is how these policies are implemented. If he says he's going to interfere with the Fed, but doesn't really do anything major, then it's no problem, right? If he says he's going to deport 25 million people and ends up deporting 1 million people, no big deal, right? If he says he's going to do tariffs, but ends up using it as a bargaining stick to get other countries to give America favorable terms, then that's actually good, right? Maybe he achieves something on the tax bill. Maybe he achieves something to expand energy supply, right? So there's the range of possible outcomes from very, very bad to quite good. I think we just don't know, frankly, where things are going to end up.
Yeah, because there is that classic thing with Trump of what he says he'll do and what he actually does. And with that in mind, Chris, do you think that, Trump has promised his voters, he's promised everybody that he's going to make them richer and that it's going to be this golden age. If he doesn't do that, will it even matter? Because if you look back at the wall didn't get built. People still forgave Trump for that. It wasn't a thing. They still supported him. So is this really do or die for Trump when it comes to the economy?
Well, he is term limited, so he's only going to be able to be president for 4 more years. But I mean, you're right. His voters, he has a real hold over a very large share of the electorate. He's a generational political talent, and I don't expect that if things go poorly that they're going to necessarily turn on him. But he does have a very difficult road ahead of him because You got to remember the margins that he has in Congress this year are going to be much, much smaller than he did in 2017 when he came in. And this Republican caucus is very fractious. There's a lot of competing interests. And so for him to push through a tax bill this year, which he has to do lest taxes rise the following year, he's going to have to somehow get all these interests on board, and it'll be very interesting to see if he can accomplish that.
Stephen, what's your take on that? Because you have this figure who is perceived by so many people as this successful New York businessman. He knows how to get deals done. Even if he doesn't, and the economy doesn't go in the right direction, will it ultimately matter to him as a political figure? Will people ever turn against Donald Trump?
He's pulled off something remarkable politically, right? I mean, I think after 2020, a lot of people, I think, thought he would just, go away and never be seen from again. And he came back and he killed a first-term, Democratic administration, right? It's been a long time since that happened, right? So I think his legacy is assured no matter what happens. What more could Donald Trump want than to be inaugurated again in January?
Okay, Chris, Stephen, thank you both so much for your time. That's all for this week. Donald Trump campaigned on promises made, promises kept. He's got some big ones to fulfill. We'll be keeping track of all of it on Inside America. Thanks for watching. Do join us next time.